that strength training is just for bodybuilders. So
It's not?
just for the Arnolds and the Lou Ferrignos out there flexing in front of the mirror. No, it's not. Strength training is literally for anyone. It is literally, I worked with an 80-year-old client and we did what I would consider strength training. Mm-hmm. We learned how to sit down with a 10-pound medicine ball. We learned how to farmer's carry. We learned how to do all of these things. It's for anybody who wants to move better, live longer, and, fight off any injury, resist injury in their body. Welcome to Beyond the Reps, where we talk about all things your physical therapist and trainer forgot to tell you. I'm one of your hosts, Whitney Stevenson. I am a gym owner, a celebrity trainer, and a personal training coach.
And I'm Dr. Hannah Shays, your co-host. I'm a physical therapist and practice owner. All right, episode 4.
Here we are.
We are going to talk about lifting for longevity, moving well, and staying strong for life.
That's right. Some focus on strength training today. It's kind of the trend right now. Everyone is doing some kind of strength training. I feel like it's very popular. So
this is a trend I can get behind, though.
This is a trend I can definitely
not all trends, but I can get behind this one
for sure. Let's just dive right into it. So I own a personal training gym, and I'm super passionate about getting people to strength train and get familiar with weights. One of the things that I like to talk about is just to have people understand what lifting is, and also that lifting a 2-pound weight many times does not necessarily mean that you're actually strength training. We see these smaller weights show up in group classes and stuff, and there's definitely a time and place for them. I don't discredit them, but there is a time and place for strength training, and by that definition, I want to say it means to lift heavy, right? So we have to create some kind of adaptation. We have to have some kind of breakdown for the body to cultivate muscle growth. So lifting heavy is definitely important when it comes to defining what strength training is. There has to be an element that's heavy. I also think there needs to be an element of doing it fairly often. Lifting heavy once a month is not going to take you very far. You're probably just going to feel sore every time you do it. So I would suggest 2 to 3 days of strength training weekly would be ideal for any kind of performance result or aesthetic goal that you have. And you can kind of mix in those other things. If you like to do a sculpt class that has those smaller weights, or Pilates, or a yoga class or something else, or maybe you do a higher intensity interval class, those can be worked in with your strength training, which is going to be dedicated to lifting heavier, and doing that maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And then also having variety in your lifts. So we don't want to do the same thing over and over and over again. That can kind of lead to some wear and tear. We can do some progression, but we want to, again, create some adaptation. So we want to stimulate and keep the body challenged, so we can add variety to the exercises. So if you're doing, let's say you want to focus on your butt, your glutes, right? You can do things that target the same area but create a different stimulus. So you could work the 3 bigger muscles of the glute by doing, hip thrusts, step ups, reverse lunges, or you could target it by doing back squats or front squats mixed in with deficit reverse lunges or some booty band work. So there's ways that you can add variety and kind of keep things exciting and stimulating for your strength training, and not just repeat the same 3 movements, deadlift, squat, bench over and over and over again, because you could, come into some overuse and injury.
Well, and that's your philosophy on strength training.
Yes.
And then you also have a little blurb on Sun-Made strength training philosophy.
Yeah. So for Sun-Made Fitness, strength training is the ritual of choosing hard on purpose. So hard being heavyweight. Mm-hmm. Life is also hard. So we're choosing hard on purpose. It's putting your body under stress, weights, resistance, gravity, so you can come out stronger, steadier, and more capable, right? We're using weights to build a better base, to build a better foundation, to build a better body, for whatever life is going to give us. So it's not just about aesthetics. It's not about ego. It's not about who has the most on the bar, but it's about your own ownership of your body. So you walk in, you load up, you get intimate with that discomfort, and then you are able to like break down in order to rebuild, which is the process of building muscle and maintaining muscle.
A beautiful metaphor.
So we suffer now in the moment so you can carry more later on the platform or in your life or in your mind. Strength training is where you meet the part of you that doesn't quit. And I think that's really the philosophy that I like to embody, and I want my clients and anybody who steps in the doors at Sunmade Fitness to embody when it comes to strength training.
Yeah, I think for me, my reason for doing strength training and what I look for, because I don't do, typical performance training with my clients, I tend to focus on the neuromuscular pattern being on first, because, I've had some clients come in who they're doing rows and they're rowing with their triceps and not their scapular muscles. Or they're squatting with their quads and not their glutes.
And this is somebody who probably feels that they're doing the movement correctly. Like they're coming in going, this is how I squat.
Yeah.
Why do my knees hurt? And you are then assessing and going, well, there is a whole system we're missing.
And a lot of times these people are already working with a trainer.
Unfortunately.
So I always really focus on making sure the neuromuscular pattern is on, because you're not going to get strength in your glutes or hypertrophy. Everyone wants a nice round butt, right? You're not going to get that if the butt pattern's not on and you're using your quads to squat and your hamstrings to do other things. Like, it's just not going to happen. So really what I dive into with people is just making sure the patterning is there and you know how your body should feel to do certain movements.
Yeah.
So when we start, working with neuromuscular training, if you're really focusing on it, it's the thing that comes before the hypertrophy and the feeling of strength. So it's the first 4 to 6 weeks of really focusing on it, but it's something you want to work every single day almost. It's not like the same as strength training where you're only doing it maybe a few times a week so you give your body rest so that it can recover, but you want to build that neuro pattern so that the pathway gets stronger and stronger, and then you can start working on actually the hypertrophy aspect.
Yeah, I love the neuromuscular pattern, and I like to integrate a lot of probably similar exercises that you would use or you would assign a client in a warm-up to turn on and engage the brain, and in kind of like, send a car down that freeway type of thing. Like, hey, let's turn on our glutes, or hey, let's turn on our core, or hey, this is what we need to activate for putting something overhead. And I think, like, for me, what I learned this just through creating my own warm-ups when I was competing, and then now creating warm-ups for other people, is that like you said, strengthens that like neuromuscular connection. Like my mind-body connection, my mind-muscle connection is stronger. And I also feel safer. I feel more confident in my training because I know that like I'm prepared. Yeah. I know I'm warmed up. All systems are firing. We got green lights going. And I don't have to be thinking about or concerned about being injured during, a strength training day or a high intensity day, which I think is really, really important to remove that element of, oh crap, I might hurt myself, or what if I hurt myself? Being able to remove that from a client and have them trust their body has been huge. And I think the only way to get there is to integrate some of that neuromuscular rehab style movements into a warm-up.
The other thing that I want to cover before we get into the meat and potatoes of the episode, because within this episode we're going to talk about strength training across the lifespan. I don't think we said that earlier. So from childhood, high school, so pre-puberty, post-puberty, college, women and men in their 30s and 40s, which is kind of the last frontier to build that muscle before you start losing it in the last phase, middle age, and beyond. So we kind of covered like what is strength training and then neuromuscular training, and now we're going to talk a little bit, just briefly, because it matters for the end of the discussion, the two main types of muscle fibers, so type 1 and type 2. And one of the points I want to make is some people think that jogging or walking, I have a lot of older clients say this, that my legs should be strong. I jog and I walk every day. Why aren't my legs strong? And let's just be really clear that jogging does not strengthen your muscles. It improves your muscle endurance, but it's going to be more dominant towards the type 1 fibers in your muscles, which are for endurance. Postural muscles do endurance, type 1 fiber dominant. And then type 2 fibers are what you're going to get the hypertrophy out of, because those are going to be more focused on strength, quick movements, and power. So again, like I said, postural muscles like your spinal extensors that are holding you upright sitting or standing, that's more type 1 dominant. And then type 2 dominant muscle groups are, calves, quads, hamstrings, glute max, deltoids, biceps, triceps, pec major, anything where you can do lots of pushing, pulling, explosive movements. But our muscles are generally a mix of both.
Yeah, they're big contractors, right? Like type 2 is like a big contractor. Type 1 is more of like a stabilizer, maybe. That would be like a good way to kind of understand it. Also, jogging and walking is not bad. It's great. But it does not mean that you're strength training if you are walking. It means you are exercising, which is awesome. And walking is like one of the best ways to start an exercise journey. In order to kind of sustain health for a very long period of time, walking will only take you so far. And strength training is paramount in, staving off osteoporosis, the loss of muscle mass as we age, and muscle is becoming like the tissue of longevity. And the only way to maintain or build that is through strength training, which does not discount walking or jogging as exercise. It's just a different thing that you can add in and really help have quality of life for a long period of time.
Yeah, definitely include walking and jogging in your weekly workouts. This is not just a podcast about strength training is king, only do strength training. But it is important to understand why strength training is important across the lifespan, because it can prevent lots of chronic diseases, and muscle is becoming the organ of longevity. So we want to have that kind of improve, reduce our risk against things like diabetes, osteoporosis, sarcopenia, which is that progressive muscle mass loss with age. So without further ado, should we start with the first stage of strength training in life, which would be childhood? Pre-puberty. This is pre-puberty, not high school.
Yes. My mom would be like, Whitney was lifting in the womb.
What were you lifting?
I have no idea.
You were just punching? Were you
just punching.
Just punching?
Like, just doing some squats, hanging out in there. So I think there are a lot of hot takes and opinions about strength training with children. I even feel weird saying it, but I shouldn't, because strength training for kiddos is totally cool. I think there's some outdated fears around, oh my gosh, if you're a kid, they weightlift, their growth is gonna be stunted, their growth plates are gonna get ruined, they're gonna fracture, it's not safe. And yes, like all of those things might have a percentage of happening, or it might be unsafe if you're putting themselves in an unsafe environment or not in a coached environment. But as a general rule, some strength training in kids is going to be overall really, really good for them. Just like for older people, strength training in kids can help with bone density. It can help with tissue development. Most of all, it's going to help with body awareness and building a sense of self within one body. A kiddo can feel themselves move a certain way, move against a certain thing, pick something up that's 6 pounds and bring it over here. It teaches them kind of like what that feels like. I also think having some tempo involved, so you can teach kids how to move fast and how to move slow, which is, when you're learning how to run, that's one of like the best things to learn, is how to sprint, how to accelerate, and how to decelerate, especially coming from like an injury prevention.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Some concentric versus eccentric training.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know from a rehab perspective too, if you ever worked in pediatric therapy or you've had your kid go there. A lot of it is basically tricking them into playing in a rehab perspective. So I think for most of the time with children, it's not necessarily about, you're not going to get really hypertrophy.
No.
There's
That's
no
not
hormones
important.
at play right now. So that's not really the goal for doing strength training in childhood, is not going to be the same as, you know, the different stages. But it does help with that neuromuscular control, kind of learning where their body is in space, how their body should move, the proper muscle activation. So it can be really good for improving sport coordination.
And even discovering their own sense of coordination. Oh, when if I put my left foot down and I can turn my right hip, I can move fast, or I can move my hips this way. And so, developing that sense of coordination, or even discovering like, oh, I'm better on my right side than on my left side. Why am I not as good on my left side? It can become this sort of really good self-exploration for them. And from learning technique, or focusing on technique, not focusing on like what the body looks like as far as like aesthetics, but what the body looks like when it's moving, in like a supervised manner, they can apply these things, these lessons, or whatever they're understanding, and put it towards maybe a sport that they like. Oh, I know that I like doing step-ups. I know that I like accelerating and decelerating. Oh, maybe I'm going to try soccer. It kind of is like a little gateway into, okay.
That is not how it started for me. I like to accelerate.
I like to accelerate.
Play soccer.
Well, that's how it happened for me. When I was swimming, I knew that I liked going fast. That was it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I liked going fast in the water, and I liked what that felt like. I liked going fast. So that became my gateway into competition and racing, because I liked going fast. That was my thing.
I didn't want to do anything when I was a kid. My parents just made me play when I was 4, and that was that.
Yeah. Well, okay. So for kiddos, we got a focus on technique, obviously not load.
Yep.
That does still mean that you can, quote unquote, load kids. Like, no, I'm not asking an 8-year-old to try to back squat their body weight, but you can give, an 8-year-old a 6-pound medicine ball and teach them to hold it, give it a hug, keep your chest up, flat feet, send your knees out, and squat.
I mean, that's functional. Caveman days, kids had to pick stuff up. You had to move a giant rock.
You weren't sitting on a toilet.
Move some
You were
sticks.
sitting over a hole.
Pick some stuff up.
Exactly. So, and what does mom want you to do? Mom wants you to go around picking up your toys for your chore, right? So you got to be,
Farmers'
cognizant.
carries can help you carry groceries.
Bending over.
It's functional.
It is functional. And I would say for kids, obviously the emphasis there is to put the fun in functional. You have to have safety and you have to have supervision, but overall that skill development and learning what the body feels like as far as strength training with resistance, with bands, with, moderate to lightweight, and just even body weight is going to transfer to a greater life, pretty much, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, so now we've hit puberty.
Uh-oh.
So we can start hitting some gains with hypertrophy now that the hormones are on and flowing. So with high school, I know you and I were talking about this, a week or two ago, and you were talking about the Q angle specifically, and how with females, that's going to be the change, was their hips get wider, the bone, the femur, the thigh bone, and the angle between the thigh bone and the kneecap, and then the lower leg bone, the tibia, changes as the hips get wider. And then,
it changes without even that individual, like say you or me, because we were both, teenage females. We don't even know that it's happening.
Oh yeah.
Like all of a sudden
you can't feel it.
No, I mean I fortunately never even really fully experienced growing pains. I know some people feel them. I never had that. It's sort of like your body just does this adaptation and changes, but your mechanics that you've been doing, okay, so for 15 years, you learned to walk and run a certain way, and now your whole hip structure and knee structure is changing, but your mechanics are staying exactly the same. and you're wondering why you're walking around with your butt sticking out, or why your back's hurting, or why
Knee pain.
you have knee pain now when you're only 15 years old. And it's sort of like, well, your body underwent this change, and now you might have to like adapt, some differences in your body mechanics and how you move, or how you run, or how you walk, or how you stand. And you might have to develop some awareness of what you are doing because of the changes, and kind of how to correct. Because the body's always choosing the path of least resistance. So if like your body shifts, then your mechanics are kind of going to shift with it in this way that's, absent-minded. Like you're just going to go. And then all of a sudden you've been in this weird pattern for so long, and you're like, oh no, this is not right anymore.
Yeah.
Now I have knee pain when I walk.
Well, and females tend to be they have looser ligaments, or more hypermobility causes joint instability. And so the
Especially
change in hormones are going to
changes,
make your ligaments more lax. I mean, you see with pregnant women who have this huge surge of hormones, they start having all these joint pains, things get looser because it's preparing the body for birth. But, when you hit puberty, well, you're having a surge of hormones. So that is definitely a change to, the ligaments and how you're kind of used to stabilizing and moving in your sport, especially with the widening of the hips. Yeah.
So, and for guys, I almost feel like it's kind of the opposite, in that they're coming into like a great surge of hormones that is not necessarily changing a mechanical angle of their body.
Yeah.
And they're somewhat more encouraged to maybe spend more time in the gym. And a lot of high school male sports teams do start to integrate strength training. I know football teams have weight rooms. I know wrestling teams have weight rooms. I know basketball has weight rooms in high school. So their exposure starts to become more apparent to the gym, where that doesn't necessarily happen with young females. So, and it is imperative that both male and female do get exposure to the gym at that age, because of all the changes that are happening. Strength training can, with supervision, can correct. We can use it as like some postural ways, can correct some of those mechanical errors that are happening in females. Strengthen your glutes, strengthen your hamstring, develop your posterior. So now your Q angle doesn't become something that causes back pain anymore. And then for guys, it can just teach them, basically better mechanics, so they can develop more strength and power with maybe more sport specific stuff that they're going into. Mm-hmm. So the only caveat is that a lot of the exposure that this age group has is through a coach that might not necessarily know 100% what they're talking about. They might not even know what a Q angle is.
Oh yeah. I mean, when we were playing soccer in high school, like we were not exposed to strength training or movement training. The only exercise that I had middle school, age 10 to right before I went to college, was literally just playing soccer. I didn't lift weights. Our coaches didn't do anything. And then when I went to college, it was finally, oh, we have a weight room. Oh, my friend wants to go lift. I guess I'll be a lifting buddy. Or, oh, everyone's at the college gym. There's this giant gym we can all go to. And so people go and they don't know how to move properly. They're just moving how they've been moving. And now you're going to add weight to it. And you have no awareness of how your body's changed or what it should even feel like to move properly.
Yeah.
Which is a huge risk for injury.
The huge risk. And more of this age group obviously they have social media. They have access to all the TikTok and Instagramming people who are probably putting out really good content and really good workouts. I've seen a lot of good quality stuff out there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for that individual. And it also doesn't mean that like that individual is moving with the right mechanics to execute the workout as, Stacy Fit Girl is showing on her Instagram. So there is an element of learning what do's and don'ts are in the gym, and as far as like what do's and don'ts are for your own body, like what works, what doesn't work, Where is my body awareness? Am I just like repping through this workout that I don't even know what it is? And I would suggest if there are, people out there that are young and they go to the gym and they don't know what to do, is if you are going to take that workout, what I would do is I would back off with the load and I would add tempo. So if you were completely clueless, you had no form, you're just going off of TikTok, this girl's doing 3 sets of 8 goblet squats with a 45-pound kettlebell, grab the 20, do 3 sets of 8 and slow it down. Do 3-second tempo down. And then I think that would be a good way to, at least that's the only advice I have, unless you want to work with a coach or a trainer, which would be like the best. Like you hire a coach, you hire a trainer, and you have them write workouts for you and you learn. You understand, develop body awareness through coaching. If you don't have access to that, just start adding some tempo, some eccentric tempo to help understand like what your body is doing within the movement. I don't know if that would be something you would suggest, but
I would definitely suggest making sure that if you're doing goblet squats that your glutes are
activated.
That your glutes are doing it. You're not doing it with your quads.
You're doing your neuromuscular warm-up.
Okay, so to summarize for children in kind of high school, pre-college, we want to make sure that the strength training is focused on, I guess, more of the neuromuscular aspects even before you want to get into the hypertrophy, so that we can improve overall bone density and bone growth, and then we're not causing injury. I also want to say that kids who lift develop better motor skills and focus and confidence. That is what some of the research has shown.
Yes, and lifting does not stunt growth. So you can lift weights, you can add weight, you can add load. And again, load is loose. Load could be 2 pounds, load could be 6 pounds, load could be 26 pounds. It doesn't necessarily need to be body weight or 3 digits or, beyond. For youth, like that is considered a load.
Yeah. And then the last summarizing point is that supervised strength training reduces sports injuries by up to 68%, which I like this one that you threw in there because we did a thesis when I was at UNC on injury risk in college-aged female athletes, and those with a quote-unquote bad movement profile. We were doing like from a box down to the floor of a jump squat. The bad movers were landing super rigid, so the ground reaction forces were just kind of like going through them, not optimally. And they didn't have much muscle mass on them. We weren't really doing it too much on like the look of the muscle mass, but they tended to have less muscle mass versus the quote unquote good movers, which were looser, had better coordination, better neuromuscular control, and were at less of a risk of causing injury.
Did it say what the good movers did to be good movers? Were they strength training?
Okay, so what we did was we filmed them from the front and from the side, and we saw like how were they moving, were their knees diving in, and actually we had them all do a DEXA scan.
Okay.
That's what we did. And so we did see the bone density, which didn't matter. Everyone's bone density was fine. Everyone was 20. But we were using that to look at the muscle mass. So yeah, it was lean mass. I forgot. It was so long ago. Yeah, it was the point was everyone who had more lean mass was at less of a risk of injury, and they had better movement profiles.
Yeah. And the way to develop lean muscle mass, other than genetically be gifted, is to strength train. So you could say that basically you have a kid, if they are doing sports and they are not doing any strength training, they are at a higher risk of injury than a kid who is doing the same sport and incorporating in strength training. Because the additional lean muscle mass that is added through strength training is a body armor. Correct? Okay.
I agree with that.
Cool.
You can say that.
It is said. All right, so now we're going into my favorite subject, college.
It's your favorite?
I mean, there's just so much tea I could unpack about college, especially college sports. Being a Division I athlete at 2 different big-time Division I schools and doing strength training as part of my, my swimming career, strength training assigned to me, and literally leaving these two schools and being like, I still don't know how to squat properly. And relearning how to, execute squats, cleans, deadlifts, bench press, all the things that I was technically doing in my collegiate sport strength training, but just very mindlessly. Like I was very unaware of what I was doing at that moment in time. And also, I would preface that I had some exposure to weights, and when I was swimming, we used to call it dry land, which was basically cross training on land for the water. So I did have some gym and weight exposure before going into college. And even for me, it was like I was walking into, a whole new arena. Because as a Division I athlete, female athlete, we lifted with where the football team lifts. So at one of the schools that I went to, we would go to the weight room, and the weight room was in the basement. So we would go to the hall. The hall was basically this huge room with a bunch of trophies, all the trophies from the football team, Heisman's, gauntlets. It was incredible. And then you take this metal stairwell, and you can just smell the dampness as you walk down the metal stairwell. Ugh. And then you were in this basement, and it was all lifting platforms, weights, barbells, pull-ups, squat racks, just all of this equipment. And I was so intimidated, and I didn't even know how to remove a dumbbell off of a rack at the time.
Who's teaching us this? No one's teaching you this. I mean, you just have to do it.
Yeah, Ivan, the strength coach was like, all right, grab the dumbbells. And you're just like, okay, I guess, what is this rice for? I think I'm going to put my hands in the rice.
Rice?
Yeah, we had, instead of chalk, we had rice sorry, I'm rubbing my hands on the microphone. But we had rice to kind of rub your hands through.
I don't think I've heard of that.
Oh my God, it was immersible. It was not sanitary. I think they probably got rid of the rice in COVID. But having exposure to the weight room pre-college, even if you are not playing any sport, is so important, because that's when you kind of start lifting and living and doing all these things on your own. So any exposure that you can get before that is just going to set you up more for success. And it's less figuring out on the fly, which things are hard to figure out right now. Life is we get so much information. One day we're doing this, one day that's canceled. If you can just have exposure to etiquette in the weight room, that's going to set you up better, whether you're playing a sport or not, or just going to the weight room because you want to look good at the frat party.
All the frat parties you were going to.
I mean, you were in the sorority. I was not on frat row.
I was imagining, as you were talking about what's trendy now, what was trendy before, that conversation we were talking about earlier with the women in the, what was it, 1950s?
Yes.
And you're just sitting there and the belt was just rubbing you, and it's we'll lose weight this way. This is great exercise.
Literally,
maybe that'll come back.
It was gossip hour. It was okay, we're going to the gym, but really
salon.
I'm just going to talk to Hannah while this conveyor belt rubs
the fat off.
It disintegrates my cellulite away. There were women lifting weights though. There definitely were.
Yeah. That wasn't trendy back then.
It was probably very few, but there were some that were out there pioneering the path for us. And I'm so grateful to them.
So for college athletes, I know when I was going into college, literally every single person on my high school soccer team went to go play somewhere. And like I said, we never had any type of, no one was training us or coaching us on movement. They weren't. I don't even know if that's still a thing. And the whatever bad movement pattern you had, you're taking it with you to college, put it in your suitcase, it's going with you, and then you're lifting weights with that form. So I think college is definitely when a lot of people finally, I know we said it's important to immerse yourself if you can before college with weightlifting, but college is when I think most people actually start.
Yeah.
And people, like you said, they don't know what they're doing. And did Ivan give you formal training, or did he just make sure you were safe?
No,
like,
I think most of the and the landscape of college is different because I am now older, but at my peak training when I was in college when I was swimming, the coaches that were coaching us wrote great programs, right? The programming was great. Hey, this is what you're doing, A1, A2, A3, B1, B2. Like, they were all the appropriate movements and things to get us better in the pool on land. However, the understanding of the mechanics and the movement wasn't quite as deep.
Yeah.
So there were the correction, the movement safety, the standard of the movement, that was like all across the board. Like, people were doing wild things.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Like, flagrant errors were happening. But there was still a coach and it was still supervised, which if you can go into that environment, if I could rewind and go into that environment with more understanding of my body and, my own movement, I would just be better at executing that programming for me. So that's, I guess, the point I want to drive home is that, in a sport, without a sport, whatever, if you have an understanding of how your body moves and turning things on, what doesn't work. Oh, I know that my left knee caves in a little bit when I squat. I know I really need to warm up my left hip, my glutes. If you can have some touches on that before getting into college, then you will be able to really self-coach. And there's going to be times, unfortunately, especially as an athlete, you have to self-coach yourself because somebody's not going to see you doing that, And then the trend really is to go into like a group fitness class, which is, there is a lot of self-coaching that needs to happen there. Yeah, you have your instructor. Hopefully you have a good one. Hopefully you get corrected once at least a week. But if not, it's still once a week. That's a hopefully, right? So there's at least 4 other workouts that you're probably showing up for that you're not really getting corrected. So you need to have your own built-in like protocol or built-in coaching to kind of combat what life is going to offer you as far as like fitness goes and strength training goes if you're not choosing an individual trainer or an individual coach to work with.
I see what you did there. You plugging yourself? Just kidding.
Shameless self-plug over here.
All right. Did we get everything out with the college phase?
Yeah.
I think we did.
The only other thing too that is the exposure of soreness versus injury, right? So because in college, you're capable now of actually lifting heavy enough to become sore.
You'll get that DOMS.
Yes, to get the DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, which I think at that moment in time was actually happening like the next day. Now I get like the 2-day. I get the 2-day DOMS, like 2 days after I work out.
Mine's almost exactly 24 hours.
Nice.
I don't know why.
You're still young. Just wait.
I forget that you're a little older.
But that is a memory that I have is being sore from a movement and not knowing, oh, did I injure myself or am I sore?
Yeah.
Because I didn't have exposure. I didn't have exposure to lifting that heavy. I didn't have exposure to any of that. And there is a fear that then kind of clouds around strength training because you're like, oh, I just don't want to hurt my back.
Did I hurt myself last time? I'm hurting myself this time. I mean, that is actually, if you guys can start to learn early on what, like Whitney said, that soreness versus pain, because they're 2 different things, is that will make my life and other physical therapists' lives so much easier, because when we're doing rehab for pain and we're giving you challenging exercises, you will get some soreness if the muscle's been super underutilized. And it's really hard when I work with older people and they say, this hurts. And then you ask, oh, well, does it hurt? Are we reproducing your pain? Or
what kind of hurt? Yeah.
And they're like, I don't know. It just hurts. And then you're like, okay, well, God, is this aggravating them? And no, the communication is it's really difficult sometimes. So learning what delayed onset muscle soreness feels like, because it's good. It's a good sore. It's a good hurt. It's not pain. It's not a danger signal to your brain.
Yeah. I mean, some of it could be, but that's like an extreme case. You're probably not going to do that to yourself. It would probably
be really
be induced by, a competition or something at the extreme end of
something you shouldn't be starting with.
Yes, nothing you should be starting with. And I wouldn't put it in the category of strength training. I would put it in the category of like strength competing.
Yeah.
If anything. But yeah, we can kind of use this to move into that next phase, because for me, training through college, even though it wasn't 100% perfect or setting me up with all of these, correct movement patterns, because I was passionate about it, I ended up learning about it on my own. It set me up to start to love training, for my whole life. Mm-hmm. And then, which for me, I feel really fortunate that I have that, because as we age, the importance of strength training literally from here on out, from women in, mid 30s on to, the ether, onto expiration date, it just becomes more important. Like every decade, strength training just literally becomes like more important for living longer and having a longer quality of life. So I don't know if you want to speak to what starts to happen to women after they turn 35.
I mean, I don't know if it's exactly 35, but a lot of resources just say 30s. So it could be 30 or it could be mid 30s. 35 makes sense to me because that's when a lot of hormones start to kind of change. But we tend to start losing, especially if we're not strength training, you start to lose, the research said, about 5% muscle mass if you're not strength training every decade, that you're not strength training to kind of slow down that loss. Women, it's 30s. Men, it tends to be their 40s that they'll start to lose muscle. So listen up. If you're a man in your 30s right now or a man in your 40s and you're a woman in your 30s, like this is the last frontier decade that you have to really build up before it starts to really turn around on you. And,
Well, and you'll be working hard not to add, but you'll be working hard just to maintain.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll have to work just as hard as you would to add, basically, in order to maintain, which is fine. That's great. But if you could set yourself up with more muscle before everything starts to kind of like switch gears, the hormones start to shift, that strength training is going to be something that is like an edge, especially if you can integrate it in now in early 30s through the rest of your life.
I like this quote that you have too. Women are not small men.
Women are not small men. We are not. That's Dr. Stacey Sims, she's out on all the podcasts, and she is really a pioneer as far as bringing in researched data that is actually geared towards women and performance training, or women and sport specific training, and women and strength training. Unfortunately, and I think just because of the landscape of how it is, a lot of the data backed research and claims out there are really skewed towards a male audience or a male like pool of people that they were using. So it's, there's stuff out there that isn't necessarily equal, and we have to consider that, especially because as women, our hormones shift dramatically between ages 30 and in our mid 40s. There's lots of stuff happening. Estrogen and progesterone start to switch. And basically one of the ways to stabilize those changes and continue to keep our metabolism going is to have muscle on the body.
I think too that what affects men and women in their 30s, 40s, 50s negatively with the strength training is there's often pain, whether it's from just wear and tear, people's knees hurt, so they're like, well, I'm not going to go do leg day because I can't bend and extend my knee anymore. I think a lot of people are kind of in this cycle of, I'm hurt, so I can't train. Okay, this is a little bit better. I'm going to train again. Okay, well, I got hurt. And so this barrier can kind of keep people at the prime decade of importance from training and building that muscle mass to prevent all the chronic diseases that can come later with a, less than ideal amount of muscle.
I think something I want to talk about too is this is sort of an age where we've been exposed to, a group fitness class, but more than likely like a high intensity class. They're fun. I love doing them. I cannot do them all the time because they hurt me, but I love them. However, that does not necessarily mean that you're doing strength training just because you're using a dumbbell, or even just because you're using a barbell. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are doing strength training when you are not taking the time to rest and allow the body to recover, or actually pushing the body in that set to a point of discomfort. Like you're making a grimace, you're making a face, you're thinking to yourself, man, I only got one more I can push out.
Like you might not be challenging yourself enough to get the effects.
Yeah. So, and again, that is in definition, we're talking about strength training. So if I'm moving this barbell up and down, doing thrusters and doing, 45 of them at a light weight, I'm not necessarily strength training.
Yeah.
I'm working my muscle endurance.
Yeah, like doing body weight training, doing just 100 body weight squats isn't the same as...
And I'm working an energy system I'm not allowing it the rest in order to recover, in order to like re-maximize my energy for the next set. So not that that's not a bad way to train. That's a great way to train. I don't necessarily love doing 45 thrusters, but I love doing training like that. I incorporate it into my daily routine, but I also incorporate specific strength training, which is where I'm doing a working set and I'm resting. And there's a lot of confusion around, but I go to this class and we use weights and I do all these reps and I'm injured, or I have this chronic inflammation, or I just don't feel good. And it maybe scares me away from doing, heavier weight for less because I'm just stuck in this groove. And it's kind of being able to just take a moment and understand, okay, like there is a discrepancy here. That training is high intensity interval training. It's awesome, super good, love it, keep doing it. But also understand that that's not necessarily strength training by definition. And you can add strength training to that and maybe in place of that a couple days a week. So you could do your high intensity interval training and then you could do a day of strength training where you're doing A1, A2, A3 and taking rest in between and really trying to push yourself and see if you can get 6 in a row of something and not be able to squeak out a 7th. That type of strength training. So I do think we have this age group of around 40-year-olds that have been exposed to this group training where they think they're doing strength training, but it's just a misunderstanding of what it really is, what the weight really is, what the purpose of that really is. So, and I think that's where we encounter a lot of the injury and chronic pain and inflammation and what do I do now? Well, I can't work out anymore. I just can't because I feel like glass, versus go, wait, let's dial it back. Let's reset. You weren't really doing strength training. You were doing something else. Now let's reevaluate and see what we can do.
Yeah. And for you, I like the way you do your evaluations with everyone because, you're making sure that they're moving properly too, which that's all I want to do with people is, I think that's why what we do is transformative for when we share people. We're both trying to make sure that they're moving correctly and not just moving a weight.
Yes. And that they're engaged. I think another I don't want to dog on group class because I really do think that there is a lot of positivity in it, but there are a lot of things that come up when you're dealing with chronic injury or you're dealing with not turning on the neuromuscular pattern. You're going from sitting in your car or being at the office or doing whatever your work is and showing up to class doing like a couple neck rolls and arm swings, run a 400, and then you're expected to have your whole entire like muscle system turned on. And it's not going to happen. Unless you get there 5 or 10 minutes early, bring your glute band, do some dead bugs, do some clamshells, do some lateral steps, do some Captain Morgans, then do your neck rolls and 400-meter run and da-da-da-da-da. You have a better chance of feeling better during the workout. But, by and large, a normal group fitness warm-up is not going to get your neuromuscular connection strong enough.
I'm just thinking about that Kelly that I had to do when I went to that gym a few weeks ago. We warmed up and it was fine. But you do the 400s and then you do 30 box jumps and then you do 30 wall balls. So deep squat, throwing like a 20-pound ball at a target. And even if you warmed up pretty good, like my neuromuscular system was like, we're not doing 30 and then 30. I was like, we're going to do 15 and 15. I'm not getting hurt. Like, it's no wonder people get hurt because
you're a doctor and you're making that decision. Okay. So like, think about like the normal person going in and
feel
being
like they have to compete.
Well, and they feel like this is trusted. This is getting me healthy. Right. And you should be able to trust that. Right. You should be able to go in to whatever fit facility and look at the board and go, okay, this is going to make me healthier. But there also needs to be, like I talk about in my philosophy of strength training, your own ownership of what that is, which you had going into that class. And that's why...
Not blindly following.
Exactly.
Just for the sake of health. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So there is an element, I think, of... and we're off on like this whole tangent now, but I think there is an element of this age group of like...
We're in this age group.
My age group.
It's not a tangent.
My age group.
I'm 31.
I'm not saying. Kind of like this odd exposure because we've kind of grown up with fitness right now. Like fitness blew up when we were graduating college and then it's been evolving ever since. There's been all these group fitness classes. There's CrossFit, there's functional bodybuilding, there's going to the gym and getting a big butt, there's high rocks, there's Tremble and Pilates and, like reformers and mat this and yoga sculpt that.
It's group everything.
Mm-hmm. So, and that is awesome. That is such a good, it's so cool to be surrounded by that. I can't imagine like existing when we could only, be, like you said, in the 1950s, being like scrubbed,
having the belts,
being cellulite scrubbed. Like, how lucky are we that we have like this, well of health around us? But it is confusing, and it doesn't necessarily target what each individual needs for a healthier body in the long run. Well, that's going to prevent injury and keep you moving healthier forever, or add muscle to your body to create that, the tissue of longevity, to build upon that. Like all of these group classes kind of miss the target on that.
It's a blessing if you know how to move your body and what your limits are, but I think for a lot of people it can become a curse.
Yes, for sure.
Really quick.
For sure. So resistance training or strength training, we know it did this for little kids. It does this as post 35. It protects your bone density. It prevents age-related frailty. Your bone mass and your muscle mass, but your bone mass after you're 35 starts dropping, especially for women, especially menopause. So lifting weights sends a clear signal to your bones to, hey, stay strong, stay dense. And it's basically the number one thing you can do to fight off osteoporosis is lift weights. Also, I would include in that jump training. If you are a woman over 30 and you work with me, we will jump. We do lots of different kinds of jump training. It doesn't mean that I'm having you jump, 40 inches or max height, but I'm teaching you how to land, how to engage your glutes, how to load and explode, how to extend your hips. All functional movements that are going to help strengthen your bone density and fight off osteoporosis, and C, hopefully keep you injury free so you can attempt to do these things, not only if you want to go to a group class, but just in life. What if you want to just hop off a step or a curb? You don't want to feel like you're going into knee valgus and going to break your hip or something.
Well, and I want to add a little bit more with the resistance training, building up that bone density. Mm-hmm. So just for layman's terms for the listeners, basically when you move a weight, your muscle is engaging and the tendon connects the muscle to the bone, and the tendon pulls on the bone, and it provides it with stimulation to have a the force that, strengthens it and builds a little bit more protection and resilience in that bone. So strength training is going to really help with improving that bone density. And do you have any thoughts on people? I've had a few people come to me and they said they were rucking. It's that weighted vest. Yeah. So a lot of people will do that for osteoporosis prevention, but it's walking.
It's walking
with a weighted vest.
Yeah, I don't. It's not weightlifting. It's walking with weight. So it is walking with a load. There is a lot of benefit to that. I would say if you haven't just started walking, then first start there. And then as you get more comfortable with it, add your ruck. It's really you're going to be benefited from the load that's on, but normally people aren't really loading that heavy. I would say a person who maybe 25 pounds is like max what they're wearing, unless you're like a real hardcore rucker and gonna wear one of those crazy backpacks. But like the average person who's like, hey, I want to start rucking, they're gonna wear a vest that's between 10 and 25 pounds, which is heavy enough. You're going to get some benefit. You are not going to get the benefit that you would of strength training, like with weights, high intensity, or jump training, because that's going to strengthen your joints, your tissue, the system surrounding areas, and develop your neuromuscular connection of keeping things turned on. Now, also with that, I think rucking is a good way to maintain lean muscle mass. It's a good way to introduce some weight to the body if you've done zero before. But it's not going to give you the benefit of strength training where you get basically like additional muscle mass built on, or the breaking down and rebuilding back up, which kind of stabilizes your metabolism. It's just walking with weight. You're not getting the impact, you're not getting the feedback on the bones as much. Now, it probably is better than nothing. I mean, it's definitely way better than nothing.
Yeah. Because you just see with osteoporosis prevention now, a lot of people think, oh, I just need to get a weighted vest and walk. And I mean, I would definitely argue that strength training,
I would say that's something you can add to it. I would say for somebody who is afraid or concerned that they are going to have osteoporosis, that they could strength train twice a week intentionally, and they could ruck every day. They could ruck 5 days a week, on top of that. And that would be a great balance.
And I feel like now that we're kind of just talking about osteoporosis, we just might as well lead and continue the conversation into the final stage, right? Because I want to say something more about osteoporosis, but
yeah. Well, yeah, let's. Yeah.
Are we good to move
into
that?
We're good. We're good.
So my spiel with osteoporosis kind of prevention is, I think my complaint about the current medical system is I don't think a lot of providers order a vitamin D lab when you're doing a basic blood panel.
No.
Because you're not 60 yet, so we're not really worried about it. And
it's not of the concern.
Yeah, so I always ask my provider to put it in there, but I think the reason they don't really do it is I think she'd mentioned it's not always covered by insurance, and so people would complain about it. Why are you ordering this? Now I have to pay for it. So sometimes they just won't order it too for that reason. But if you're 30 and you're getting annual lab work, I would highly recommend asking your provider to include vitamin D, just so you know if you're low or not, because you don't want to find out when you're 60 that maybe
you've been low for years.
Yeah, maybe you've been low for 10 or 20 years, and it's no wonder you're starting to get osteopenia or osteoporosis because your bone density has been suffering because your vitamin D level has been so low.
Yeah, and it more than likely is low because of our lifestyle and like what our body has evolved from. Like we were not beings that lived under fluorescent lights. We were beings that lived in caves and were out in the fields in the sun and nomads, and we used the sun as our main source of everything we were doing until we had electricity.
Yeah.
So vitamin D is, it's something you can supplement. It's something you can get on your rucks or your walks.
Working outside.
Yeah.
Well, and make no mistake, because just because we live in Florida does not mean that you're, oh, I have plenty of sun. I live in Florida.
Nope.
My vitamin D's fine. We had a mutual person who they run outside, and I asked what their D level was, and they looked and they said it was 33, which did not flag as low because that's technically acceptable, but that's on the low end.
Yeah, for the amount that this person
that's
is
suboptimal.
exposed. Yeah, it's suboptimal.
She's been outside and she's in Florida, so it's, and I'm not outside. I don't suntan anymore. I'm inside working. Like, I'm not getting the amount of vitamin D that I should be just by existing in Florida. So it's definitely something that I think you should monitor all the time. And honestly, an optimal level, you want to be optimal, right? So optimal is like 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
Really.
And you can do sublingual, you could do through nutrition, you could do, my favorite thing is literally, I like to expose my chest, like my upper chest and my belly, and go on a walk after I work out. I like to do like a little walk around where the gym is.
Yeah. The other thing I want to say too is, because people might hear this and think, well, I'll just go buy a supplement. And you want to know what your level is, because it's not like B12 where you can just take a bunch of it and pee it out and be fine. Like you can have too much vitamin D.
Yeah.
That's more of in the 80s, but you can over supplement. So if you start supplementing with a good supplement, you want to make sure that you get the level checked again in 3 to 6 months to make sure that you don't need to change the rate you're taking it. Maybe you're taking too much or you're maintaining. That's great. So just not going crazy with the vitamin D supplement because you're afraid of getting osteoporosis, but working with a provider that can guide you through that as you age would be wise.
I want to go over sarcopenia before we get into misconceptions about strength training, because I don't think that a lot of people even know or understand what sarcopenia is. And they don't even know that they're at risk for this just by aging and doing nothing.
Yes. So sarcopenia is age-related loss of muscle mass and strength. It's usually, you'll see in the muscle there's been fatty infiltration. It just happens with age. But
is that like Wagyu? Like you start to look like, are you like well marbled? Is that what happens?
I don't even, probably. There's some nice fat in there. And when I was doing some more research, because you hear about sarcopenia really in the context of 60 plus in age, but the research is a little scary, because if you're not doing anything to strength train right now, it can low-key kind of slowly start in your 30s is what it said. And I was like, oh my God. That's
the thing when people are like, I'm skinny fat.
Yeah.
It's because they don't have muscle definition.
Yeah.
Which is not toning. It is building muscle on your body. That's it. There's no other definition for it. It's not toning. Just throw that term right out the window.
So also with sarcopenia, it's not a uniform loss across the body. It mainly affects the type 2 dominant muscles. So like we said earlier in the beginning, we talked about calves, quads, hamstrings. It tends to affect the legs first. So not uniform. It's not like, oh, my pecs and my deltoids and then my quads and my calves. It's the arms and the upper body usually come later in that loss. And so you'll start to see problems with the muscle loss, such as balance impairment, increased fall risk, loss of independence, and then reduced metabolism, because if you lose skeletal muscle, you're not taking as much calories from the body to fuel and create energy. So that's where with older adults you see a lot of people say I'm getting flat butt. That's more of like, you can see that age-related loss of muscle, not even specifically like fatty infiltration, just
loss of muscle.
And so people just think that it happens immediately. It's like, oh, when you're 60, you start losing it. But if you're not training things properly, it can start way
loss
before.
had already started. Yeah. You're seeing the result of the loss at, 65 or 60, when really, if you didn't do any strength training, from your 40s on, that's when the loss is actually starting.
Especially with the things that allow it to really do its thing are hormonal changes. So you see that a lot in 50s and 60s. Poor diet. We should just always have a good diet. Poor diet doesn't do us any favors. Yeah. And then obviously we said no strength training or physical activity. Yeah, you're going to let the condition do its thing. But the ways that we can fight back against it are obviously what this whole podcast is about: strength training, resistance training, and then eating a good diet.
Yeah. And I think eating a good diet, I mean, there's so many things we can even talk about. And I know we're going late in time right now, but just as far as if you are somebody who is strength training and you want to continue to strength train, no matter what age you are, I mean, you can start strength training at 70. You can. Mm-hmm. I mean, would you be better off if you started earlier? Maybe. But that doesn't mean you can't start then. You can at least maintain. And even for some people, I have seen anomalies where they have developed muscle in their 70s. So you can start at any point. But if you are somebody who's doing that and you're up in the air about good diet, this, it's prioritize protein. You prioritize protein, secondary carbs, third fat, right? So every meal you have on your plate, you're prioritizing that protein first. And it's tough because protein is one of the most difficult things to eat easily. So you have, you usually have to refrigerate it, or you have to cook it, or it has to be mixed in with something else. So it's usually like a more than one step thing. But if you can set your life up to have protein on hand and put that at the forefront of every meal, you will be able to maintain your lean muscle mass and perhaps maybe even develop some muscle even at a later stage in life, that will help with not losing that metabolism. It will help with not developing sarcopenia. It will help with feeling better and recovering from your workouts so you can continue to strength train and fight off osteoporosis. So having protein in your diet is really important. And I think if you can take that into, I don't know what to do as far as a good diet is, and just keep it that simple, that's a really good place to start.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to get into the stomach acid thing. I'd rather get into the misconceptions about strength training.
So we got some interesting misconceptions. So misconception number 1 is that strength training is just for bodybuilders. So
it's not.
Just for the Arnolds and the Lou Ferrignos out there flexing in front of the mirror. No, it's not. Strength training is literally for anyone. It is literally, I worked with an 80-year-old client and we did what I would consider strength training. Mm-hmm. We learned how to sit down with a 10-pound medicine ball. We learned how to farmer's carry. We learned how to do all of these things. It's for anybody who wants to move better, live longer, and, fight off any injury, resist injury in their body. So if you're not building muscle, you're losing it. And if you're losing muscle, you probably are losing your independence.
But doesn't lifting make women bulky?
Oh my gosh.
That's number 2.
Yes, lifting makes women bulky. So the truth is, women do not have the exact hormone profile, or very, 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 very few have this hormone profile to quote unquote bulk easily. Like, you have to be genetically gifted in order to put on the bulk that you may be envisioning that, the bodybuilder has, or the person who's dedicated a type of training and supplementation and life in order to build muscle a certain way and look a certain way. Lifting in general strengthens it. Yes, your body will be sculpted and look a little different, but it's also going to empower you. Like, having muscle is one of the most empowering things, I think, because it literally makes you unstoppable in your life. Like, because you have muscle, you have better metabolism. You have better basal metabolic rate. You can eat more food, which means you can feel better. You can think clearer, which means you're probably going to live longer and not have dementia and be able to do things like pick up your grandchildren or water the garden or go kayak when you're 80 years old. How cool. Like, how cool is it to live this long and incur this really cool life? You don't want to be stuck in a cell. You don't want to be rotting in a home.
Because you were afraid to get bulky.
Yeah. I
Quality over quantity.
I was joking with somebody. It's not assisted living. It's group dying, Like,
I like that.
Like, that's not assisted living. Like, you're just like dying in a group. You're not out there. You want to be out there. You want to have quality of life. And one of the best ways that we're seeing that science is showing us to have quality of life is to have muscle. Get bulky. Show me. Actually, you show me. All you ladies out there who are
You're
threatening.
looking at me. I was like, show you. Show you what?
Threatening to get bulky. Go show me the bulk. I want you to come to me when you're too bulky and I'll remove the bulk.
We can use the conveyor
Yep,
belt.
we'll use the conveyor belt. We'll bust them back.
That's the theme. All right. Number 3, cardio is better for fat loss.
Yeah, no. Ding, 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 nah. So, yes, cardio burns calories, but strength training, like we were just talking about with sarcopenia, it changes your metabolism in the long run. But so because you have more muscle on your body, it encourages your body to burn more calories, or it needs to burn more calories to feed all of that muscle, which means that you're basically able to eat more and consume more. So, yeah, cardio may burn more calories, but muscle in that hour that you're doing the cardio, but muscle on your body burns more calories just by being alive. Actually, when you're sleeping, your muscle is probably burning more calories while you're sleeping than your 1 hour of cardio that you hit in the gym.
Well, and with cardio too, I mean, if you're not conditioned, you'll burn a lot of calories initially, but then your body's whole point is to adapt and get better at not losing those calories. Mm-hmm. So if you just do cardio all the time, you're eventually going to get actually better at not burning so much.
Exactly. Versus when you're strength training, you're actually...
Your muscles need it.
Your muscles need it, and the training itself will boost your resting metabolic burn.
Mm-hmm. And more skeletal muscle that you put on is going to require more calories, so you will just burn more by having more skeletal muscle.
Exactly.
All right, number 4. Strength training is bad for your joints.
Oh my gosh.
Ugh.
Strength training is so bad
Only
for my
if your
joints.
form is bad. Only if your form is bad.
Yeah, right? It's not necessarily the weight that breaks your joint or ruins your joint or causes the injury. It's like the weakness around the joint. And how do you strengthen what would be that weakness, which is the tissue around the joint, is you use strength training to protect the joint and the surrounding tissue of that joint.
For me, it's like a lot of going back to that neuromuscular system and cueing, like, oh, do your feet collapse in? Like, do your arches collapse? You pronate, and that causes your knees to go in. And then you're squatting. Well, no wonder you've worn away your knee joint.
Mm-hmm. And they even have the awareness, you know? Mm-hmm. I'm too old to start lifting, Hannah.
Oh. Oh, no.
I'm too old.
No, you're not.
No one's too old. Anyone can lift. Muscle can be built at any age. Muscle can be maintained at any age. Your nervous system adapts as long as you train it, just like she's talking about with the neuromuscular connection. Even if you've had a neuromuscular connection that's been asleep for 35 years, like the inside of your foot or your arch, you can retrain it, and then you can get it to participate again. And the same goes for your muscle on your body, your whole system. You can, as long as you're using it, you're not going to be losing it. And it's so interesting to me, is like health and fitness and movement it's so that old wives' tale of like, if you don't use it, you lose it. It is so true with muscle building and strength training. If you are not doing it, you will lose it. Like, you gotta do it. I mean, it doesn't need to be every day, but you got to put the time in. Your muscles don't care how old you are. They only care how often you show up.
Did you just come up with that?
Maybe.
That sounds like that was so articulate. All right, number 6. I can't work out. I need a gym and expensive equipment.
Yeah, you're so bougie. Okay, so the misconception is that you have to have fancy equipment or an expensive gym membership to strength train. And that is not true. You can...
flip tires in the junkyard.
Literally a gallon of water. A gallon of water is heavy.
Yeah.
You know? So strength training can be done. It doesn't need to be fancy. It can be done simple. It can be done with dumbbells. It can be done... with very minimal gear. It can be done with one kettlebell. It can be done with a gallon of water. I mean, at some point in time, I would like there to be some weight that really challenges you, ideally. But if you don't have it and you just have your body weight and the couch in your house, you could make something work.
Well, and it's not a good excuse these days because there's so many people doing remote training and virtual training.
There's so many people doing
at
virtual.
your house. Mm-hmm. So it's just not a good excuse. It's just a myth.
Yeah. And like, you know, the misconception of like, I also think that people don't understand how much things weigh in real life. Like I could show a woman a 35-pound dumbbell and be like, all right, we're going to lift this. And she could be like, oh my God, like that's so heavy. It looks so big. But she picks up her kid who's 42 pounds all the time. Mm-hmm. But it's little Charlie. It's not a 35-pound dumbbell. So it's sort of like mentally just being able to switch.
Big
like
Charlie.
Yeah. It's mentally being able to switch that like, hey, we are actually strength training and lifting things all day long. Just because it's in this form doesn't mean that like you can't do it or you have to have it in a certain form to do it.
Well, let's wrap this up, and I want to know why do you strength train? Like in general, besides what we just talked about, like, is there another reason? Is it just, it makes you feel good? Like, why does Whitney strength train at a deep level?
I mean, I think that the deepest part of why I do what I do and why I train the way I train is to further develop the relationship I have with myself. That's the most honest answer I can give, is that I really use training as a way to develop a deeper connection with like who I truly am. And I use training to develop my relationship with myself and to really work on loving myself and honoring my body. And it's constant work in progress. And weight training was one of the first things that I ever encountered where I literally could not do it. It was something that it was so abrupt. Pick up this weight. I physically can't do it. Like, I can't. And that was such an abrupt moment for me in my life of not being able to do something, and how I responded to myself was, I mean, initially it was horrible. It was like, how in the heck can you not pick this up? What's wrong with you? I'm going to cry. I'm a big crier. I'm going to cry. I'm so frustrated. I went to Olympic trials. I can't lift up this weight. This woman in this class is lifting this weight, and she's, you know, not an athlete like you. So that was my first initial jarring moment with weightlifting, where it presented to me this challenge, not only this challenge of this physical challenge of this weight, me not being able to move it, but this internal challenge of like, whoa, that's how I showed up for myself, was like shame, crying, frustration, no positivity, negative. And I did not like that. I did not like that about myself. And so because there's no real hiding in weightlifting, I use it for that personal development and to really deepen that relationship with myself and really turn that internal dialogue on its head and start to shape it into something and somebody that's grateful for their body, grateful for what it's capable of, and excited to kind of see how strong I can get and how healthy I can be for as long as I'm here.
That's a pretty good answer.
Why do you strength train other than to be inspired by me?
So, like, be inspired by you. Shut up. Okay, so like I was telling you before, because I've worked in healthcare and hospitals for so long, you're around the aging and the sick a lot. And so it's like this scary crystal ball that I can see all of the roads of what bad choices can lead to, or what good choices can lead to.
Look at all the options like life has in front of you.
Exactly. It's like, what do I want? And I'm like, oh, I don't want any of that. So it's like this weird form of control where I'm like, oh, well, if you tell me I'm going to start losing, this is the last decade I have to build up my muscle so that I can prevent that thing happening to that 80-year-old that was in the hospital, and, you know, the falls and the lack of independence, like, sign me up. I will take care of myself, because I have this fear of, you know, like developing chronic pain or losing my independence. Like, I want to be cruising around in the intercoastal when I'm 80, like in
Yeah.
that kayak, like you said. I don't want to be group dying.
No group
And
dying.
also, I strength train because I don't want to get a knee or a hip replacement or a spinal fusion. I mean, a lot of people think that we talked about earlier, like this happens because I strength trained or because I jogged too much. And it's like, no, it's probably because the form was wrong, actually. So
Yeah.
just doing all I can to support my body and strengthen my muscles so that I can have the best quality over quantity.
And quantity.
And quantity,
right? Live
yeah.
as, you know.
Yeah.
Because if
if I were to pick though, quality over quantity.
Yeah. And I think
of
too,
life.
like you're saying, if you are avoiding these big replacements, right? Big surgeries, guess what? You're also probably avoiding medication, which is going to definitely shorten the quantity of your life, just because it's so much for your body to process, and really like diminish the quality. If you have to be medicated for, the X number of years, your last number of years for whatever reason, it's, anything you can do to fight that off, I think is encouraging. Well, that is the importance of strength training across the ages. Hopefully you got a few pointers out of it. Maybe you can take into the gym next time. And on behalf of myself and Dr. Hannah Shays, we want to say thanks for listening
to
Beyond the Reps, what your physical therapist and trainer forgot to tell you.